Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am just going to start this discussion with a statement that has nothing to do with what we're going to talk about, or indeed this conclave. And that's the fact that I'm a Bengali. And I've grown up in Delhi, so I've spent a large chunk of my life trying to figure out what is a Bengali, trying to find bits and pieces of Bengaliness that I can connect to. And one of the things that I realized I was very intrigued by is the Bengali who likes to drink. And I'll tell you why. My relatives often tell me these very, very interesting stories about, my ancestors. And I find it very fascinating, these immaculately dressed gentlemen stepping out with a kapde ka jhola and filling it up with whiskey and begun bhaja. It's another thing I'm trying to understand how my ancestors saw Bengan and said, chakna. So one of my favorite stories that I just like to share is of uncle I had, a kaka, who was very entrepreneurial about making spirits at home. And he would keep experimenting. And he came to realize that the Swedish actually steep their vodka with fermented fish. So he said, well, there's an idea. And he tried that with Hilsa, failed horribly, succeeded in blinding himself. And I'm saying this to you because I really think he'd be so happy and proud of the current Indian market, where there is so much of innovation and creativity happening. We have wine made from peaches in Ladakh, and we have single origin jaggery rum, and I believe there is wine being made from jamuns and locally produced honey. So it's a very exciting time when we're using fruit and flour and grain and yeast to do magical things. And I really hope that this discussion gives us insights into this world, but also a little bit about our liqueur heritage and how GI might be able to help preserve it. So I'm just going to start with you, Mr. Arora. We have GI tags already in India for Scotch whiskey, Irish whiskey, and Japanese whiskey. Do you think it's time for Indian whiskey to get one?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. Essentially, if you really take a step back and understand, alcohol or spirits or premium beverages, however you refer to them, they all have become a lifestyle across the world. It's not just about alcohol, it's not just about what people used to drink for impact. It's more about socialization, it's more about lifestyle, it's more about imagery. So the entire facet of thinking on the alcohol change has taken place over the last few decades. Some of the earlier players where alcohol was more accepted socially, like Europe and the US, they applied for these things much earlier. What does a GI tag undertake for a brand or a category? It gives you heritage, it gives you legacy, it gives you permanence, and it gives you an identity of what you belong, where you come in from, and what are the factors that have been created to give you a supremacy from what you had earlier. So 1967, champagne got a little more appellation. 70s, tequila got an appellation. We recognize tequila now. For many years, tequila used to be what you drank and you were blowing. But now tequila is sipped, it's nuanced. And there are certain tequila bottles which are 16 lakhs a bottle, and they are being picked up crazily. So GI has lent credence, credibility, and imagery to most of these products. Scotch was always there. So essentially, that's one level in terms of GI. In terms of India, for a very long time, while we were the largest, and we are the largest consumer of whiskies in the world, we consume close to 350 million cases of whiskey per annum. So we should be very healthy, happy, and very spirited in that sense. So we have a perpetual high as in India. But for a long time, there was less, to be very honest with you, less credibility attached to Indian whiskies. We always preferred a Scotch. People used to say, I don't drink whiskey, I drink Scotch. Then came this little high which says, I go for Japanese whiskies. Then came this little thing saying, hey, guess what? I'm trying a bourbon. Right? But Indian whiskey was not relegated in a good bar. It was not placed in premium locations, though we were continuing to be consumed a lot more. Then in 2004 onwards, Amrut launched its whiskey in Scotland. They were the first ones. They created the whole market. 2012, 13, Paul John came, and then so on after that. Today, there are currently close to 150 variants of Indian whiskies across. So when you have this kind of choice, this kind of variety, this kind of suggestions, this kind of palettes, this kind of finishes and styles, it definitely seeks out that you should have your own GI tag.
And what are some of the regions or states from which whiskey deserves a GI tag in India?
In India? Well, I don't know if we can look at it as a region perspective. Not yet. Maybe next 3 years. Currently, most of the whiskey distilleries are based in Karnataka or in Tamil Nadu or in Rajasthan. They are based everywhere. There are two factors to it. One is the single malts, which come from one distillery, which possibly will go for a higher base of GI. So then one distillery is based in Himachal, one is in Karnataka. So I'm not too sure at this point in time we could go by region as early as now. But maybe 3 years from now, when Uttarakhand and Himachal become legacy driven, we could look at region. I think for currently we should start by making whiskey from India to Indian whiskey. That is a journey we need to capture right now.
Right. You know, alcohol is a highly regulated market in this country. What is needed for an IFML or IMFL, Indian-made foreign liqueur, to get a GI tag?
First of all, thank you to DPIAT and also India Today Group for inviting me. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to update you, Sandeep, on this front, because the Indian single malt whiskies journey not only began in 2004 with Amrut, but it was also then joined in by Radico, Paul John, Piccadilly, which launched Indri and also got global acclaim. Having said that, they are also now on a journey to try and register their GI, and I was fortunate enough to be involved in that very complex assignment to draw out some standards or guidelines which will be internal to the Indian single malt whiskey producers. Of course, initially it will be limited, but as and when the numbers grow. So what I can say is that even though the Food Authority of India, the FSSAI, Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, has laid down their alcoholic beverages regulation, which defines that single malt whiskey shall be made from malted barley and distilled in pot still. But what I found was that it is lacking. It is lacking in the sense that when you study the global best practices, whether it is with respect to Scotch whiskey or Irish whiskey or bourbon whiskey, Tennessee whiskey or Japanese whiskey, all of them, they have a minimum maturation period of 3 years. And I will come back to that 3 years also. Then, it has to be not only pot still, but copper pot still, because that gives you the characteristics to the whiskey. Then it has to be aged in oak cask, not any other kind of wooden cask, because it will not lend you that kind of sensory evaluation with respect to color, taste, aroma, and so on and so forth. And finally, that, those oak cask also has to be limited in terms of size. It has to be below 700 liters. And the unfortunate part in India is that, because of the climatic conditions, the angel share, which is the evaporation rate, is as high as 12% on an average I'm talking about. If you go by Karnataka excise rules, they permit about 28% in 3 years' time, the evaporation. Whereas in colder countries like Scotland, or you go to any other country in Europe, the evaporation rate or the angel share is merely 2%. Now, this is where, some bit of problem for IMFL category is coming in, because they are unable to export their whiskies out of India because their maturation is less than 2 years or maybe less than 1 year. And the minimum requirement, what is perceived as a non-tariff barrier by whether it is the UK part in terms of the FTA or the Australian side, they're all demanding minimum 3 years maturation. Now, this is where I feel that, if at all an initiative has been taken by the Indian Malt Whisky Association, whom I am consulting, And I have already prepared the guidelines. Now they are preparing their application to be made to the registrar of GI, and hopefully they should get it very soon. So it is going to not only benefit the industry per se, but the farmers who are doing the malts and supplying these malts to them. Then you have the long-standing chain over there. Then most importantly, the consumers stand to benefit. And all this kind of value chain that is being created by registering a GI, we should not look at a kind of very myopic kind of vision that, it will lead to economic benefits. There are certain additional benefits which Himani ma'am also very rightly pointed out and said that, we have to look at much more than what meets the eye at this moment.
We have, whiskeys and wines and brandies and so on. Something I'm very also, again, intrigued by is the community nature of alcohol. And there's nothing more like it than country liquor or desi daru. All these varieties of, various tribes making their, particular local spirits and so on. And in India, we just have 2 local indigenous spirits which have received a GI tag, I think. Feni, which is cashew liqueur, and Jurima, which is rice wine from Assam. What is needed for more desi daru to get a GI certification, and why is it just the 2 of them have it?
I was not aware about Jurima that, it already has the GI tag, but thanks for updating me. It is Nasik Valley Wines also which has got the GI tag.
But that's not really a desi daru.
You see, unfortunately, Nasik Valley Wines or now that, Feni has got it or Jurima has, what I have seen in terms of Nasik Valley Wines GI tag is that they have not been able to create a brand perception. That brand equity is missing. So, you need a very kind of strong brand enforcement, brand promotion done by the Association of Wine Producers in India. And you need to invest money, possibly, get support from other stakeholders like government is there. So to try and create some bit of noise about it. So that positive narrative has to be built up. Just like, champagne or Scotch whiskey or cognac. I've been to champagne and cognac also. And I can tell you that, the storytelling has been there right from day one. Today, I used to work with Moet Hennessy. So the best of the champagnes were there. So I know that, what kind of story goes behind their sale of a bottle of champagne, whether it is Dom Perignon or Clicquot or whatever you can call. Similarly, sparkling wines are being produced in India. How many stories are we building around that? Because all sparkling wines cannot be champagne, but all champagnes are sparkling wines, right? Similarly, in terms of cognac, it is a grape brandy. Yeah. Not the Indian brandy, the grape
say
brandy.
For a toddy or an arak, to receive GI certification, what would be needed?
See, it is sort of, so far that, in my considered opinion, under the IPR ambit, you need a convergence of traditional knowledge or the traditional cultural expression to converge into GI. And what you need is that some bit of awareness, as Mr. Amitabh Kant also mentioned in the morning, to try and engage not only the producers, but their flagship producer organization who has to be the proprietor. The law demands that you need to have a proprietor of that GI who represents the interests of the producers, and then those producers become the authorized users. So you have to have a convergence of the entire community.
Yeah. And you were telling me that Mahua is a very promising candidate, liqueur made from Mahua flowers. Why is that?
So essentially what we've seen thus far is Feni. And like Rajesh mentioned that, wine couldn't live up to the big opportunity that it would have capitalized on. But I think the way we are studying the trends right now, I think the next big Indian liqueur, which can go global, is Mahua. So Mahua right now, if you see, the season is starting right now. And we already have a Mahua which is being sold in Bombay, there's a Mahua bar being created in a bar, and a very prominent bar. And the taste, which is basically flowers, the story is beautiful. It's tribals, it's artisan, the local governments are supporting it. So if all of these people from Chhattisgarh, MP, Rajasthan, Maharashtra, they look at that together as a collective entity, Mahua can be India's possibly first truly global spirit. And that, I think, is a fantastic opportunity because the cost is not very high.
Yeah, you
but
mentioned
the storytelling is incredible. And the second one, which I feel can make a lot of difference, is rum. Amrut has just launched rum, which is essentially made with gur, which is with jaggery. And that is Bella, which is the first of its kind.
Yeah.
So, Ron Zacapa can talk about, maturing under the clouds. But a lot of Indian producers from rum and possibly Mahua can be the next big boys. And exactly if they market themselves well and they take it on to the next level.
Yeah. One of the things with GI tags is often having official records or gazette records that can establish origin. Now in India, for example, palm wine or coconut sap is used in multiple indigenous liqueurs. You have a variety in Kerala, you have one in Karnataka, one in Tamil Nadu. How do you figure out where it originated or who gets the GI tag?
You see, this is the reason I said that, we need not only very strong regulatory framework, but also at the same time it has to be coupled with a stringent enforcement action. Because if at all you want to keep the traditional knowledge converging into GI, alive, then you need to keep the unscrupulous players out of business. And within the alcoholic beverage industry, the counterfeit activities is so high that if at all I remember correctly, FICCI had conducted a study with, or rather FICCI Cascade study on counterfeit, and within alcoholic beverages it went as high as 40%. So you are never sure that, if at all you're drinking a genuine black label or a Chivas Regal, especially when you buy it from one of the neighboring states. So yes, with respect to GI, these kind of traditional spirits, I guess, fruit wines have also caught up, as you rightly mentioned about Ladakh. I had met a couple of wine producers who were doing it with respect to kiwi. And similarly, these kind of wines or maybe traditional knowledge with respect to beer made out of rice or wines made out of rice, they all can be, yet again culminated into a GI and then promoted.
Yeah, no, I find there's such a beautiful story in using indigenous spices and flowers to make, infuse it into the spirit. So you have gin made out of quinoa and mahua as well now, which, it sounds lovely. Do you think it can go a little overboard at times? Like if you just start infusing cardamom and, black pepper and whatnot into spirits to get a story out of it?
I mean, story building up will be very difficult, but yes, as traditional knowledge, I think you can really pervade within the Indian community because we are a large population base and preferences are also diverse.
You have something?
I think absolutely right. I think somewhere on the whiskey front, if you want to get a GI, that's one thing. But secondly, there has to be a certain quality parameter associated with Indian whiskies. We need to go the Japanese way of looking at the way they have created such a single positioning for themselves. The Japanese whiskies are considered premium, luxury, and definitely quality standards. So one, on the whiskey front, which is the largest expression of alcohol from India, there has to be a certain parameter, like whether it's 3 years, 2 years, like what Ajnish mentioned, basic factors, like everybody talks about 6-row barley from Rajasthan. So one parameter there. Secondly, the local indigenous spirits. Not everybody can stand up and start claiming that I've created 50 liters of alcohol or something, I get a GI. I think it's a structured category that can get into it. Otherwise, it will become a gimmick. Anybody will start and taking it on. Like Mahua, like I said Mahua because state governments are backing it. 2, very serious Indian players are evaluating the option. 3, the palate across the world is getting younger. People are going for non-alcoholic beverages or low alcohol beverages. So Mahua can actually be in a way, and I would even be presumptuous enough to say that Mahua has the potential, the opportunity to be the tequila from this part of the world, if it's really traded well.
And yes.
I'd like to add over one aspect that, why I mentioned there is that a strong regulatory framework, because if you leave it to the industry, there is a huge limitation in terms of enforcement of those standards that I spoke about. So possibly, of course, the industry, what I have recommended is that the industry association must liaise with FSSAI to try and get these standards adopted by FSSAI because it will have the statutory force. And this is what truly, this is exactly true, if at all you look at the global perspective, whether it is Scotch whisky, which is under the HMRC, His Majesty Revenue and Customs, which is a statutory body. If you look at champagne, cognac, all of them have the statutory regulations to try and live up to that quality. It is not only with respect to Indian single malt or other wines and spirits, it could be true with all the products that we have been talking about since morning. That a strong regulatory framework and enforcement actions will really lead to positive results.
Just a quick last question. Are there any other Indian spirits that, whose market is promising, like brandy or gin or
Unfortunately, gin is having a little tough time right now. There was a gold rush a few years back when everybody set up a pot still and started making gin. There were close to 35 gin brands. But now today, if you see, some of them have been bought over at the right time. Some of them have just quietened up. So gin, I don't think, is really there. And also gin is very connected with Europe. Right? Second thing is brandy. Again, brandy is more in the south of the country. The brandy has a chance, but I don't think it really qualifies. I feel like what Rajneesh said, even a regulatory framework, I think we should focus on few spirits to set the precedent, gain the learnings, and make them global, rather than starting everything. So even if you start with Indian rums, Indian whiskies, and Indian Mahua as a native Indian spirit, I think we have a huge task ahead of us.
Thank you.
I just wanted to answer, a question which Himani ma'am had put up, that, why exactly Indian wines are lagging or not comparable to Napa Valley wines. I tried and gave a thought to it that, first of all, Indian wine industry is a very nascent industry in India as compared to the long-standing heritage that Napa Valley wines has. And because in 1976, when they had the judgment of Paris where they beat the French wines, that is where they were able to bring and build up that brand equity. Now, that heritage and the brand heritage really played on to the minds of consumers, which means the consumers' perception was given or bent across to make them feel that they are a premium wine. And that is where, they started to build on. The second aspect is that here they are investing a lot of money in terms of technology, in terms of vineyard management, in terms of aging process, because more aging that you do for a wine, it really takes the essential sensory capabilities in terms of aroma, taste, and notes from the barrels. And then they are also investing a huge amount of money in terms of promoting their brand equity. So all these factors are really playing a lot, whereas, Indian wines are being perceived as entry-level wines, which are not really aged properly and so on and so forth. So they are not able to command that kind of high prices. And hence, in major global markets, if at all you see, I will say that, it is not really a kind of equitable competitive platform that they are in.
So Rajneesh, do you feel, just to add to what you're saying, I think a couple of other things in the wine could also be that, the understanding in European countries where wine is far more mature and accepted, the understanding of the grape varietal, the country of origins are very high. Here in India, I don't think most people understand how the grapes differ, what is the varietal, what is the difference between the Bangalore vineyards of Fratelli and the Sula of Nasik. So, and also I think globally, maybe now for the last few years, the wine market is getting a little quieter. They're growing in some regions, but not so much so. In India, I think spirits are in a different level altogether. But definitely, these people who made some really great suggestions, like Shando, for example, has a very good taste palette. Is very refreshing. It's quite nice. And if they add, maybe all of them get together, there is a good opportunity they can enhance the value of Indian wines globally. Maybe packaging will help. Another area.
Or marketing it as peaches from Ladakh and jamuns from Maharashtra. It's a beautiful thing. Well, just before the session, I was getting a drink of water, and they're in cans at this venue. And my husband called me up. Yes. And my husband called me up on a video call to say best of luck. And he sees me and he's like, you're very enthusiastic today. And I said, yes, I am. And the session didn't disappoint. I hope you agree with me. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.